Thank you, and good morning.
Good morning.
I'm pleased to see Otna folks here, and also my very good friend, longtime compatriot, Christopher Jean from Gakona. We started out together in what you might call this long march to equality. That was back in the 60s. We're still here, Chris. I wanted to, I'm not going to tell you my name because in our Athabascan tradition, you don't go around telling your own name to people. It's what we used to refer to as Ingi, part of our traditional law. Matter of fact, when I was growing up, they were still telling stories about our old-time chiefs who would, if you spoke your name to somebody else, in many cases, it would be an act of war, extreme aggression. And I have never liked introducing myself in crowds all my life. So it's not an offense to you that I don't introduce myself. It's just an observance of something that you don't hear much about these days. There's a couple of things that I wanted to talk to you about this morning. Number one, I wanted to speak just a bit about community wellness in terms of time. Then I wanted to speak a bit about tribal courts. The first part of community wellness is an issue in Indian country because of the linguistic problems with the term community. We don't have, in the Athabascan language that I come out of, we don't have a term for community. We have any number of dialects. We have 8 clans, several dialects, and 1 or 2 written notational dialects. We don't use that term community because we're a clan-based system. We will use in certain specific events terms like Neskarezi, which is together, walking together or being together. So it's very difficult to translate from English into Athabascan what community and community wellness means. The other part of the issue of community wellness is a little known fact that in Indian country among tribes, the question of tribal sovereignty is also correlated with the issue of tribal spirituality. The two actually are together. We have never in our dialect said tribes only. It's always the way we think and the way we live, the way we believe fits into the way we describe who we are. So it's not in Athabascan, it's not just tribal government. It's not just tribe. It's tribal people, tribal spirituality, and tribal governance. So our terminology would say that. You can see why it's difficult to move the concept of what a tribal wellness program would be in its traditional roots over to what a community wellness program would constitute in today's society. Let's face it, we have to do that. You can't separate anymore the issue of what a wellness or a wellness program is supposed to do. We all know what it's supposed to do. And we can no longer sit back and say, well, language and semantics and the issue of not being able to correlate will stop us from doing what we need to do. It's no longer a given for us to use those kind of reasons not to do what we need to do. Community wellness, when I first ran across it in the 80s, was related to alcoholism. I served on the Alaska Federation of Native Sobriety Council for a number of years. So we began with the community wellness on the issue of dealing with alcohol. In the 90s, the Indian Health Service began looking at community wellness in terms of a more rational approach to lower the costs, medical costs and behavioral costs nationwide. But they ran out of steam and what have you in very short order. So community wellness today is kind of stuck where IHS left it off in the 90s. What we have to do is look at community wellness in terms of who it is that we want to be, not what it is that we were or not what it is that we are. Who do we want to be tomorrow? That's community wellness. I'm not going to go into the grim statistics, which I know very well, about all of the issues related to addictive lifestyles. Just before I start talking about tribal courts, and particularly when it comes down to the issue of what we would call the punishment side of any kind of court activities, I want you to think about something that is becoming very well known in America, and that is punishment has no place in a modern society. It's the last recourse, not the first recourse. It doesn't matter anymore what we do in terms of a tribal court activity. Our role is to ensure that the outcome fits what it is that we want to be tomorrow. That's what I wanted to make sure that you heard today. I can talk about tribal courts all day, development and codes, what have you. I'm kind of an expert in this field. What I wanted to talk to you about this morning was the issue of alignment, of terminology, and alignment of intent, and alignment of purpose through tribal courts. We have culture camps, and we have all kinds of activities that are related to what it is that we want to teach our youngsters. We never think about the fact that those cultural camps and those gatherings and those places where we produce these events that are related to our kids are the perfect vehicle for our tribal courts to practice what it needs to practice in order to be effective in the communities. In this day and age, there's no reason for us to say that we cannot do this, or this is not the way we do things. In this day and age, in 2015, the only recourse we have is to say we must do this. We don't have the option anymore of saying, well, doggone it, things just ain't working out. It's a global crisis in terms of community involvement, and you're in it whether or not you recognize the issue or you recognize the fact. I'm in it, everybody's in it. I want to end with a couple of observations about tribal court in general. Excuse me. Tribal court, or I should say, traditional justice system has been around for as long as tribes have been around, from the beginning. There is no earthly reason why we can't rediscover ourselves through this process. The terminology has changed, the language has changed. The issue of having things like community crop up that doesn't translate, we can set those aside. There's no reason why we can't rediscover who we are through tribal court activities. There's no reason why we can't apply traditional justice. There's no reason on God's green earth why we can't be ourselves. I want to mention one more item before I step down from the dais here. I began in high school in Anchorage in 1965, West Anchorage High. There were no drugs that I know of in the school at the time, lots of mean kids, lots of loud bullies. There were no street drugs, marijuana. There was no ingestion of any kind of substance in 1965. By 1968, when I graduated, that school, like every other school in a big city, had been transformed into a huge, attractive force for every kind of use of substance that you can dream up of. For a number of years, I walked the streets and hung around with kids in Anchorage that were becoming serious addicts. My addiction was alcohol, theirs was drugs. I can tell you to this day there was a lot of crime. Yes, there was a lot of largesse. There was a lot of issues related to addiction. But you know, not a single one of those addicts were criminals. Think about it. None of them were criminals. They were high school kids. They were victims. And because they were victims, their lives were destroyed by a legal mechanism and a legal system that had no care about the individuals. Tribal courts care. Tribal courts want those victims to be around as productive citizens 30 years down the road. That's the bottom line. So, thank you.